Shemu'el 1, 1 Samuel chapter 17. And the Pelishtites had gathered their armies for battle, and came together at Socoh, which belongs to Yahudah, and encamped between Socoh and Azekah in Ephes Demim. And Shaul and the men of Yisrael were gathered and encamped in the valley of Eloah, and drew up in battle array to meet the Pelishtites. And the Pelishtites stood on a mountain on one side, and Yisrael stood on a mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the camp of the Pelishtites, named Golyath, from Gath, whose height was 4 amah and a zereth. And a bronze helmet was on his head, and he was armed with a scaled armor, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and bronze shin guards on his legs, and a bronze spear between his shoulders. And the wood of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead 600 shekels, and a shield-bearer went before him. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Yisrael, and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Pelishtite, and you the servants of Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me, and shall smite me, then we shall be your servants. But if I overcome him, and shall smite him, then you shall be our servants, and serve us." Then the Pelishtites said, "This day I shall reproach the armies of Yisrael. Give me a man, and let us fight together." And Shaul and all Yisrael heard these words of the Pelishite, and they were broken down and in great fear. Now Dawid was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Yahudah, whose name was Yishai. And he had 8 sons, and in the days of Shaul the man was old among men. And the 3 oldest sons of Yishai went. They had gone to follow Shaul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliav the firstborn, and his second Avinadab, and the third Shema. And Dawid was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Shaul. But Dawid went and returned from Shaul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Pelishite drew near morning and evening, and took his stand. Then Yishai said to his son Dawid, "Please take to your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and take these 10 cheeses to the commander of the 1,000, and see how your brothers are, and bring back news of them." For Shaul and they and all the men of Yisrael were in the valley of Eloah fighting with the Pelishtites. And Dawid rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a herdsman, and took and went as Yishai had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight, and they shouted for the battle. And Yisrael and the Pelishtites drew up in battle array, army against army. And Dawid left his supplies in the hand of the keeper of the supplies, and ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. And he was speaking with them, and saw the champion, the Pelishite of Gath, Golyath by name, coming up from the armies of the Pelishtites. And he spoke according to the same words, and Dawid heard. And all the men of Yisrael, when they saw the man, ran from him, and were in great fear. And the men of Yisrael said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? For he has come up to reproach Yisrael. And it shall be that the man who smites him, the sovereign, is going to enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption in Yisrael." And Dawid spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, "What shall be done for the man who smites this Pelishite, and shall take away reproach from Yisrael? For who is this uncircumcised Pelishite, that he should reproach the armies of the living Elohim?" And the people answered him according to this word, saying, "This is what is done for the man who smites him." And Eliav, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliav's displeasure burned against Dawid, and he said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." And Dawid said, "Now what have I done? Was it not but a word?" And he turned around from him toward another, and said the same word. And these people answered him a word like the first word. And when the words which Dawid spoke were heard, they reported them to Shemu'el, and he sent for him. And Dawid said to Shemu'el, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant is going and shall fight with this Pelishite. And Shemu'el said to Dawid, You are not able to go against this Pelishite to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of battle from his youth. Then Dawid said to Shemu'el, Your servant has been tending sheep for his father, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and smote it and rescued from its mouth. And when it rose against me, I took hold of its beard and smote it and killed it. Your servant has smitten both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Pelishite shall be like one of them, seeing he has reproached the armies of the living Elohim. And Dawid said, Yahuah, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he delivers me from the hand of this Pelishite. And Shemu'el said to Dawid, Go, and Yahuah be with you. And Shemu'el dressed Dawid with his garments, and he put a bronze helmet on his head and put a coat of armor on him. And Dawid girded his sword over his garments and began to go, but he had not tried them. Then Dawid said to Shemu'el, I am not able to go with these, for I have not tried them. So Dawid took them off, and he took his staff in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the wadi, and put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Pelishite. And the Pelishite came and began drawing near to Dawid, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Pelishite looked about and saw Dawid, he despised him, for he was a youth, and tanned, and good-looking. And the Pelishite said to Dawid, Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Pelishite cursed Dawid by his mighty ones. And the Pelishite said to Dawid, Come to me, and I give your flesh to the birds of the Shamayim and the beasts of the field. But Dawid said to the Pelishite, You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a lance, but I come to you in the name of Yahuah of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Yisrael, whom you have reproached. This day Yahuah shall deliver you into my hand, and I shall smite you and take your head from you, and give the carcasses of the camp of the Pelishites today to the birds of the Shamayim and the wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth know that Elohim is for Yisrael, and all this assembly know that Yahuah does not save with sword and spear, for the battle belongs to Yahuah, and he shall give you into our hands. And it came to be, when the Pelishite arose and came and drew near to meet Dawid, that Dawid hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Pelishite. And Dawid put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and slung it and smote the Pelishite on his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Then Dawid prevailed over the Pelishite with a sling and a stone, and smote the Pelishite and killed him, and there was no sword in the hand of Dawid. Then Dawid ran and stood over the Pelishite, and took his sword, and drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Pelishites saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Yisrael and Yehudah rose and shouted and pursued the Pelishites as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Pelishites fell along the way to She'arim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Yisrael turned back from chasing the Pelishites, and they plundered their camps. And Dawid took the head of the Pelishite and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his weapons in his tent. And when Shemu'el saw Dawid going out against the Pelishite, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your being lives, O sovereign, I do not know. And the sovereign said, Ask whose son this young man is. And when Dawid returned from the slaughter of the Pelishite, Abner took him and brought him before Shemu'el with the head of the Pelishite in his hand. And Shaul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? And Dawid said, The son of your servant Yishai the Bethlehemite. Shemu'el 1, 1 Samuel chapter 18. And it came to be, when he had ended speaking to Shaul, that the being of Yahonathan was knit to the being of Dawid, and Yahonathan loved him as his own being. And Shaul took him that day, and would not let him return to his father's house any more. And Yahonathan and Dawid made a covenant, because he loved him as his own being. And Yahonathan took off the robe that was on him, and gave it to Dawid, and his garments, even to his sword, and his bow, and his girdle. And Dawid went out wherever Shaul sent him. He acted wisely, and Shaul appointed him over the men of battle, and it was right in the eyes of all the people, and also in the eyes of Shaul's servants. And it came to be, as they came in, as Dawid was returning from smiting the Palestite, that the women came out from all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet Shaul the sovereign with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang as they danced, and said, Shaul smote his thousands, and Dawid his 10,000s. And Shaul was very wroth, and this matter was evil in his eyes, and he said, To Dawid they have given 10,000s, and to me they have given thousands. So what more for him, except the rain? And from that day on Shaul eyed Dawid. And it came to be on the next day that an evil spirit from Elohim came upon Shaul, and he, Navu, inside the house, while Dawid was playing by his hand as usual, and the spear was in the hand of Shaul. Then Shaul hurled the spear, for he said, Let me smite Dawid even to the wall. But twice Dawid withdrew from his presence, and Shaul was afraid of Dawid, because Yahuah was with him. But from Shaul he had turned away. Shaul therefore removed him from his presence, and made him his commander over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people, and Dawid was acting wisely in all his ways, and Yahuah was with him. And Shaul saw that he was acting very wisely, and was afraid of him. But all Yisrael and Yehudah loved Dawid, and he went out and came in before them. And Shaul said to Dawid, See my older daughter Merev? I give her to you as a wife. Only be brave for me, and fight the battles of Yahuah. For Shaul thought, Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Palestites be against him. And Dawid said to Shaul, Who am I, and what is my life, or my father's clan in Yisrael, that I should be son-in-law to the sovereign? And it came to be at the time when Merev, Shaul's daughter, should have been given to Dawid, that she was given to Adriel, the Mecholathite, as a wife. And Mikal, Shaul's daughter, loved Dawid. And they told Shaul, and the matter was right in his eyes. And Shaul said, Let me give her to him, and let her be a snare to him, and the hand of the Palestites be against him. So Shaul said to Dawid a second time, Become my son-in-law today. And Shaul commanded his servants, Speak to Dawid gently, and say, See, the sovereign has delighted in you, and all his servants have loved you, and now be the sovereign's son-in-law. And the servants of Shaul spoke those words in the hearing of Dawid, and Dawid said, Does it seem to you a small matter to be a sovereign's son-in-law, seeing I am a poor man and lightly esteemed? And the servants of Shaul told him, saying, Dawid has spoken according to these words. And Shaul said, Say to Dawid, the sovereign has no delight in any payment for the bride, but 100 foreskins of the Palestites, to take vengeance on the sovereign's enemies. But Shaul intended to have Dawid fall by the hand of the Palestites. And his servants declared these words to Dawid, and it pleased Dawid well to become the sovereign's son-in-law. And the days had not expired, and Dawid arose and went, he and his men, and smote 200 men of the Palestites. And Dawid brought their foreskins, and they put them before the sovereign, to become the sovereign's son-in-law. And Shaul gave him Mikal, his daughter, as wife. And Shaul saw and knew that Yahuah was with Dawid, and Mikal, daughter of Shaul, loved him. So then Shaul was still more afraid of Dawid, and Shaul came to be an enemy of Dawid all the days. And the princes of the Palestinites went out, and it came to be, whenever they went out, that Dawid acted more wisely than all the servants of Shaul, so that his name came to be very precious.